The next panel discussion is digital immersive experience economy. And what we will be focusing on is the global shift, excuse me, towards the ever-increasing usage and the reliance, as we saw earlier, works most of the time, but not always, of technology to create a digital immersive experience, and how this will affect the entertainment and creative industries. It will consider the opportunities, the challenges, and the paradoxes for the creative industries. Many of those paradoxes come from things like we saw earlier, things not quite lining up, but also AI. Where does creativity live and how does it work? And how the creative industries are bracing themselves for things that are generated from these kind of technologies, and how we prepare ourselves for the multidisciplinary, immersive, and technological world in which we live. Excuse me, tickle. Now, our panel speakers are going to come up as a group. So please come up, and they will introduce themselves as they speak. I'll remind our panel speakers to use the mics. We are recording the session, so when you have a question, we'll get a mic to you as well. This is interactive, so we're not going to do the questions at the end. We're going to do it as we go. I will briefly introduce everyone. We have Dr. Robert Walton, who will be our facilitator. He's a Dean's, my research fellow in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. I think I'll have to get you in order. Max Coffman, the Deputy CEO of Creative Victoria. Bruce Peterson, the founder and chair of the LUME Melbourne and Grande experiences. Monica Lim, who's an artist, pianist, and also the co-founder of Project 11. Seb Chan, who's the director and CEO of ACMI. And Professor Taehyun, who we know as TJ Rhee, Digital Innovation from the Faculty of Engineering and IT at the University of Melbourne, who has just joined us from the University in New Zealand. Also, we have one other panel member who's going to stay in the audience, and that's Dr. Solange Glasser, who's a senior lecturer in music psychology, and she specializes in performance anxiety. Not that we ever feel that here, no, not at all. And she's in the Conservatorium of Music in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. Over to you, Robert and panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And yeah, I think this panel is going to be really good coming out of the back of the previous discussion. I think there's a lot of crossovers. So a little introduction from me, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to just introduce themselves very briefly and share something that's on their mind at the moment. So instead of another talk about AI, fascinating, challenging, and pressing as it is, we decided to convene this panel to discuss something bigger, a global shift to an economy of immersive experiences that is affecting our sector and our precinct locally. The emergence of AI is bound up in this shift. I call it reality proliferation. It is at once terrifying and hugely exciting, and is a major challenge of our time. Organizations and practitioners are responding in a range of innovative ways. A few examples include MIF's XR program, Malthouse's major experiments with immersive theatre, the creation of the LUME, NGV's first triennial featuring the works of Team Lab, the emergence of new kinds of creative studio, such as Foria, who are represented here today, rising shift towards ambient outdoor events, programming and the legacy of White Night, ACMI's recent Marshmallow Laser Feast show, to name a few. And I also like to say one other is an interesting one. The first LARP, the live-action role-playing game, Dance of Ribbons, was funded by Creative Victoria this year for the first time. That was a 4-day-long event where the audience, it sold out within an hour. The audience were required to go to training events before the session, before the event took place, and then they stayed there for 4 days, slept there, ate there, socialized there, lived there, and that's another kind of emerging immersive experience that's happening that connects into the games world. So each of our panel members holds a piece of this emerging puzzle, and the hope today is to share our perspectives, to reveal a bigger picture, and potentially name the beast. We will also consider the precinct's potential and speculate on future trends and our collective preparedness. So we have this amazing panel today, and I'd invite you each to introduce yourselves now and share a little bit about what's on your mind in response to the theme, just as an opener. You do want to start, Max?
Sure. So I'm Max Coffman. I'm from Creative Victoria, which is your state government creative industries body. We work with 10 or so state-owned institutions, like the one that Seb heads up.
Certainly odd.
Definitely odd. And 140 or so other organizations that are not owned by the government. And sort of many of them are dabbling in this kind of space. And so it's been really interesting to watch how each different kind of organization has approached this trend, and we'll get into more of that a bit later, I suspect. My provocation, I guess, is when I first went to Team Lab Tokyo, I came out of that thinking, all right, I reckon everyone's going to be doing something like this very soon, and we'll see some kind of convergence, and soon we'll be seeing this kind of thing everywhere we go. And as I was wandering through Yokohama Harbor, watching the Diamond Princess in the bay, I thought, is that a good thing? Is it a good development, or is it going to be a homogenizing thing? So I'm really interested in how can this be a diversifying trend rather than a homogenizing trend.
Thanks, Max. Bruce, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. So most would know the LUME in Melbourne, which I founded during the COVID period, but we actually go back to 2006. We started life as an artefact-based exhibition company, licensing artefact-based exhibitions into museums, galleries around the world. And it was about that time that I noticed that visitors weren't engaging particularly well in that style of exhibition. And it was around about the same time the iPhone came out. And so we set about to create a touring version of the world's first, what was then multimedia exhibition. So it hadn't been done before. We spent 2 years between 2009, 2011, creating a 36-channel, 36 projectors, sound output touring experience that we put on at the Art Science Museum for its first experience in Singapore. And it was extremely successful, but we obviously had a lot of resistance at the time because it was new technology. For many it was seen as a little bit of blasphemy for the arts world, and it was a threat more than anything. But we persisted and roll the movie forward now. We have done about 280 exhibitions around the world. We're close to 200 cities, 34 languages, 24 million visitors. And this is a really, really challenging environment. Right now, it is at an intersection, and it's a really poignant time for discussion that we're about to have.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, hi, my name is Monica Lim, and I am a full-time practicing artist. I'm also a researcher here at the University of Melbourne, and I work across the faculty of the music. I work across dance and also computing, so I'm quite familiar with the idea of immersive and multi-modal experiences. My provocation, I guess, I just came back on a flight from Seoul at 5 a.m. this morning from the Seoul Performing Arts Festival, and talking to the curator there. The curator was saying that they were really trying to program things that works that did not fit neatly into any one genre or category. And they were really interested in things that were trying to find a new way of performance and perhaps hybrid forms of performance. And I thought that was a really interesting a thing and curatorial stance to take. And for me as a practicing artist, well, what does that mean for the artist? How do our research institutions, our teaching institutions, then provide the skills for the new generation of artists to have that sort of broad range of capabilities and understanding of art and computing and technology? That's my interest and provocation for today. I'd love to explore that.
Thank you, Monica. Seb?
Hi, I'm Seb Chen, the director and CEO of one of the odd institutions that Max spoke about.
Arguably the oddest, really.
Possibly the oddest. Your Museum of Screen Culture up at Federation Square. But what I guess I've also been on the board of the Art kind of Science Museum, which is where Bruce had his first exhibition, which you mentioned, and the Art Science Museum put a Team Lab permanent gallery in 2015. It's been incredibly successful for them. I have a background also in organising big music events and other things. I'm very interested in this notion of what immersion means, and certainly from a multi-sensory way of thinking about it, and the way you feel sound. You don't just hear sound, and sound is not used enough in museums. But I guess for me, it feels like we've come out of a bubble period where what my museum is about high capital creative works. They're works that we saw in the virtual production studio set up here too. These are high capital creative works. They need a lot of investment. They need a lot of infrastructure, and that used to be cheaper than it is now. Capital is expensive now. We also, I think a lot about what it means coming out of the lockdown period and what that means for a bubble moment around sociality. That people are coming out of a period where they couldn't socialise, and we've come into a period where that's highly desirable. Is that sustainable? We've talked a bit about AI already, and I'm very interested in synthetic media and these generational shifts around the value of humanness. And I was at a talk yesterday at RMIT where there was a lot of discussion about a very sort of modernist view of the artist expressing a human thing, and it was about generative music, and in fact generative music goes back centuries, and perhaps we're asking the wrong questions about that. So I'm also interested in what is the new critical languages we need to evaluate and make sense of these types of new experiences too. We might be applying the wrong models to it, and I think that's part of what Bruce has run up against too, is that we have that it doesn't necessarily, when it's not this versus that, it's this and that, and it's the hybridness. So anyway, all of that.
Thank you, Seb. TJ?
Hi, my name is Taehyun James Rhee. Simply call me TJ. I'm a professor at School of Computing and Information System, Faculty of Engineering and IT at University of Melbourne. My research is related to computer graphics, computer vision, and XR. And the thing that I believe that I'm a creative scientist, and the tool that I'm using is mathematical equations, physical simulation, and software programming. But the thing that we produce is, I think, it's a creative outcome. And my career, professional career, started from industry. I start my first work in the 1996 in Samsung as a researcher. The thing that I did at the time is to transform the analog design process to digital platform. Actually, it was quite challenging at that time. This is quite common now, but at that time it took 8 years to transform the analog design process to digital process. And after that, I have studied in the US, in the LA for my PhD in the Hollywood sector in LA. And then I came back to Samsung and lead their computer graphics research and XR research as a principal researcher and the general manager at Future IT Center. The interesting part of that job is to expect the future, 5 to 10 years later, what will be happen, that we can develop something that can be effective at that time, but it's actually not like a fortune teller, something like that. But this is a kind of a statistic to evaluate the information that we have developed so far, and then have some like novel idea for developing something in the future. And my academic career started from 2012 in New Zealand. I worked with local industry like a film sector, like Weta Digital, which is making the virtual visual effect for films like Lord of the Rings, Avatar. And we developed some like curriculum for students, combining the computer science and media and design to teach both the technical side and also art side. And before joining to Melbourne 3 months ago, I was in New Zealand for leading the center called Computation and Media Innovation Center, which promote international collaboration, especially to link the academic research to industry. So that was also very challenging because that was the middle of the pandemic. And I recently joined to Melbourne, and I hope to bring my prior experience in the other region of the world and then try to open the opportunity, connection, discussion in Melbourne.
Thank you, TJ. So, what an amazing panel. And how do you think we could make it better? Well, we also have Solange Glasser in the audience. So the organisers of the event today wanted us to think differently about each panel to make each one slightly different. And so we thought, because Solange is so amazing, we would use Solange as a special responder, if you like, a first responder for our event. So Solange, could you introduce yourself, please, and what your role is today?
Wow, those are big shoes to fill. Thank you, Robert. Well, we often say that the arts are the first responders to societal change, so perhaps I'm the conduit of that today. My name is Solange Glasser. I'm a senior lecturer in music psychology here at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. This is an awkward angle, isn't it? Maybe I will move this way slightly so I can have a better view of you all. And my role today is simply to be a commentator on what you're going to hear from our panel today. And Vicky, I think it was you. Where are you, Vicky? There you are. You mentioned, let me see, that we need to think beyond the physical space into the spaces between. So perhaps I'm situated in that liminal space between the panel and you as the audience, and hopefully here to provoke you to think of those really interesting, provocative questions that you'd like to ask the panel.
Thank you, Solange. And look, I magically got a new microphone. Isn't that great? You can keep your own. So we're going to come back to Solange periodically. We've basically got 3 sections to our talk today, and we'll try and keep it agile and quick. Well, we'll take the time it takes. The first question is, what is the digital immersive experience economy? So we put what is it? What are we actually talking about? And in this section, we're going to talk about the terms that we're using and how each person is responding to that. Remember at the beginning, I said everyone has a kind of piece of the puzzle and we're putting the puzzle together. We don't have the answer individually, but the point of today is to come together to draw something together. This one's got a bit of reverb, I think, which is interesting sound. I've got to sing. So that's the question, is about what are we actually talking about from your perspective, and what trends have you seen emerge to get us to where we are today? And if you don't like the terms, please offer alternatives. Who'd like to start?
I can kick off.
Go on, Bruce.
So we sort of pioneered an area of this digital immersive economy, and immersive is a terribly overused word, as we know. But we started multimedia, moved into multi-sensory, and we pretty much had this market to ourselves for around about 5 or 6 years before TeamLab came along and were doing what they were doing. And then Atelier de Lumière in Paris opened up, and it was tough going, as we were moving into the blend, if you like, of technology with the arts. But we started with Leonardo da Vinci, and if you go back 500 years, art and science were the one methodology back then. There wasn't a separation, and over the last 500 years, we've sort of gone and pigeonholed everything into different areas, and they don't really often come together, but we're seeing it all converge back together now in a big way. But what we saw in COVID, which I think has set our industry back rather than forward, was we were actually the only thing on display around the world during COVID. We worked out how to remotely install some very technical exhibitions around the world in countries that were open. So we had, I'll try and keep this really brief, but I think it's an important point to how we got to where we are today with an explosion. Because that explosion wasn't there pre-COVID. We worked out how to remotely install an exhibition in Taiwan, and in a nutshell, my production team sat up overnight for 8 nights in a row and remotely installed a high-tech exhibition on Vincent van Gogh in Taiwan with a local group of production guys who were wearing head cams and a translator because none of them spoke English. So it was a phenomenal effort. 2 weeks later we opened up in Norway, another 3 weeks after that in Switzerland, and then about a month after that in the US. But we had promoters all around the world going, hang on, we're furloughed, we're shut, we've got nothing going, and these guys are selling tickets. How do we get into that? All this theatre equipment's sitting in warehouses. No music acts are travelling, no people are travelling, there's no performing arts going on anywhere because no one's crossing borders or travelling. And so we had a lot of entertainment promoters copy us, especially in the US, and it flooded really quickly. And I've been quoted to say, and I'll say it again, any goose can get a projector and point it up against a wall, even 4 walls, and play a soundtrack that's not even connected to the visuals that you're seeing, call it an immersive experience, rip it off with our marketing and go and sell millions of tickets. And that happened worldwide over the last 3 years. I'm not bitter about it at all, because what it's actually done, I'm seriously not, because what it's done is it's actually opened up the economy. It accelerated. If those of you that know and have ever been involved in when you have a product and you're the only one in the market, it's tough. But when that market opens up, you might not have as big a share of that market. You might only have a smaller amount, but the opportunities are massive. And that's what we have at the moment. We have this massive opportunity where this digital economy is now moving into retail. It's now moving into health and wellness. It's now moving into all areas that touch us, and that will provide massive opportunities.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone want to follow up on that or go back to the thought of the terms of what we're actually talking about?
I may start for the term immersive part, because that's one of my keywords of my research. And so it's kind of broad word, and the thing that I'm thinking for the media technology point of view is that immersive meaning it's kind of engagement. So for example, we are having good engagement at the moment. Is this event is immersive? Yeah? But as for example, in the media point of view, if someone could not come here because there is some time conflict or some limitation for the space, how we can share an engagement with a person who cannot be here, we can use the media technology. So we can record this part and share with them. And in that case, what will be the best form to make them to engage better than other media form? That's one of my questions for me. That can be applied for this kind of event, performance, and any other art event and sports event. If we have limitation for the time and space, we can use immersive media technology for better engagement. So this is a thing that I think as a kind of key part for the immersive, in my point of view, for the media technology. And then economies, for me, is like a environment for work together, collaboration. So how we can develop the solution and how to engage with some like a problem to tackle together. We need the economy to do it. It's, so there's a couple of terminology that we need to understand, and that's my point of view to see this kind of a keyword in this session.
I think I'd add to that you know, immersive, the desire for that TJ's kind of immersion has led over centuries to the design of different spaces that create focus between an audience and an interaction between audiences and performers, and we see that in all sorts of media technologies aligned to specific spaces. So the arrival of cinema and these sorts of things, and TV in the home, and this sort of stuff too. So I would say that immersion also relates to focus, and that's where when you move one performance from one space to another media platform, that focus is not necessarily retained. See also lectures on Zoom, for example. The student focus is not retained in the way it apparently was in the lecture theatre. I can tell you when I was at uni it wasn't, so it never is. Anyway, but the design of the lecture theatre as the space, and I think, you know, what Bruce has done with the LUME and what we do in our museum and what we've seen in other spaces too around the world is we're still trying to find spaces that are purpose-built for media surfaces, for these media surfaces, this world of screens or projection-based immersive media. And sometimes that has taken us away from the other sensory approaches, and a lot of us are experimenting and have experimented for a long time with other senses, so smell. You're seeing, particularly in retail immersive experiences now, the use of smell, obviously driven by various high-end brands that are commissioning these experiences. And the economy part is absolutely key to this. These, as I said earlier, are high capital works, and they rely on large investments and access to capital, not only for the people, but also for the equipment to make and run them. And that, I would suggest the economy part is where we're going to be really challenged in Melbourne and in Australia. That is different in different parts of the world, but the economic situations are making this much harder, and the lifespan of these technologies is not forever. You can't build it. You can build a proscenium arch theatre and it will last for a long time, but I have to go to Max and ask for capital investment, as Bruce needs to go to his backers to ask for money to replace those projectors every 3 to 4 years, and they may not come in the same sizes or they project to the same surfaces, and then the content needs to be updated as well. So just as we're in everything's becoming software as a service, and that's bringing us into a rentier kind of model where we're renting things, that economy is incredibly fragile, and so economies of scale are tough.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from Bruce around this a bit, because you've expanded into so many other markets. I'm sure that those other markets have more stability than the one here.
Not really.
Not really. Oh, there you go. There you go. So this is a tough space. It's a really tough space, right?
I mean, obviously here in Melbourne and Victoria, we're in a very different position to the rest of Australia and you know, arguably a lot of the world. But a lot of the world's suffering. The US has been suffering for 12 months or more. Very little's been done over there at the moment. You know, Europe's been, you know, suppressed. You know, Southeast Asia's, you know, kicked up. And it's still going okay through the Asian, you know, region, which is a real opportunity for us if we can learn and work how to tap into that a lot more. But the traditional markets are suffering just as much as we have. But you've hit on the head with the challenge of this immersive/digital economy is the cost within it. You know, it costs a lot for the equipment, but labour costs have actually skyrocketed along with the equipment costs, and the two together, when you've got suppressed revenues because people's share of wallet is now being asked to be spread a lot more, and you get less sales, the economics of it can be very challenging.
I think these are all brilliant points, and at the end of the last session we had a slide about this initiative in the UK, the UKRI, which funded 10 precinct projects. I would say about 75% of those are based on screen-based XR projects. And I think that's interesting to reflect on. And I think what you're saying and talking about now is about preparedness in a way and about the next steps. So I might just put that to the last part of the talk, and I might just ask if Monica has anything to say on this point of definitions and terms, or what even is it that we're talking about before we move on to the next part. And then I might leave you to the next section, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that immersion is a very big term, and beyond immersion in the very large institutional sense of having the huge space, huge, you know, theatres with very expensive equipment. Actually, I think maybe one of the driving forces of this idea of multisensory is actually the whole gaming culture. And I've got two sons, two teenage sons, so you know, I know how immersive games can be just with a computer screen, right? So it doesn't have to be the large experience. It can be a very small experience. The other thing that I'd like to reflect on is the idea of economy, because I think an economy presupposes that there must be an ecology. And what is the ecology that is supporting this sort of works? I think it includes games. It includes our social media experience of being participatory in our own, the creation of our own self and our own, we're performing ourselves. And that is all feeding into this idea of wanting experiences that then we can participate in, that we can feel immersed in. But the ecology also comes in with with the skill build-up, the technological know-how, the financial budgets.
Thank you, Monica. I mean, my question, I suppose, is about the desire. It's about desire. I think Seb talked about it. You were kind of mentioning it as well. What is the desire for these experiences, and why is it so present now? And then, why aren't people funding it more if people desire it more? Let's leave that in the air, because I want to move to Solange now for the end of this little section, for you to pick up on anything that might have been buried and maybe resurface something based on your own interest, Solange.
Sound like a gravedigger. Thank you, Robert. At the start of this conversation, Bruce, you mentioned immersion is a word that's been overused, right? And I wonder if we can flip that a little bit. It's interesting, Monica, I'm reminded of what you said with your children, and everyone in the room who has children will acknowledge that experience. I'm watching Only Murders in the Building with my kids at the moment. Very immersed in that. And then I go to bed and I read a murder mystery. I'm not that type of person, but it is happening. And I'm incredibly immersed in the pages of the book. I can see it and I can hear it as it's going on. So I'd like us to consider that immersion is actually not linked to the digital, to the experience, or to the economy, but that immersion is a human experience. That immersion, actually, the ownership of immersion is within us. So instead of considering digital immersive experience economies, perhaps it's digital experiences for immersion. And if we shift the lens to immersion being the human experience, then the digital is something that we can either decide to fund or decide not to consider, or decide to incorporate into a physical space or outside of a physical space. So that would be my first provocation. Very quickly as well, only because we're all talking about multi-sensory experiences. Marie, I'm going to pass the baton for performance anxiety to Dr. Margaret Osborne, who's the real expert in that, and I'm going to take the one of multi-sensory integration experiences and say that in music psychology there is a lot of research done in what's called sonic seasoning. It's the seasoning that occurs in food when you pair it with music. So there's an excellent opportunity for us, I think, as a precinct, going back to Susan's excellent question around food, to mix food and beverages and the arts in a really data-driven and research-informed way.
Thank you, Solange, that's great. And I'm glad you managed to make a plug for a project in there as well, it's great. So we're going to move on to the next section now. I think it's, from what we've just been talking about, it's led us on perfectly to this, which is really about the potential of the arts precinct. So we've heard some of the provocations, some of the problems, some of this area. And so my questions are, what does the future, sorry, that's the wrong one, Neil. Will the future hold? That's the future question. What is the great potential of our precinct? People and organisations, and that we're not currently making the most of. What could we achieve if we work together more effectively? And what could we do in the past that we now have to think about differently, especially thinking about Seb's point about capital expenditure and the high capital projects? And because you haven't said anything yet, Max, I'm going to go to you.
Thank you. That's a good one for me. I came into Creative Victoria at the time when the kind of Arts Precinct Transformation project was getting off the ground, so this is very dear to my heart. A couple of you will have heard me say this before, but I like to make a pitch that this Arts Precinct is a place where you can live your whole creative career, right? You can go to the secondary school, you can go to the VCA and MCM, you can have your early career in some of the organisations along the street and finish in the big halls, concert halls and galleries at the end of the road. I think the opportunity here is, I think and the difference between the past and the future is some of those disciplines and the kind of barriers to entry that I think some of these folks are talking about, the digital skills, the computing power, the access to capital, that has not been a great feature of this precinct to date, and if we're going to pursue some of these opportunities, that's probably something we need to add to the mix.
And one of my thoughts about the maps that we had in the previous session, I wonder, I'm sure the people who are doing the maps, is there a map that shows all the other organisations just around us? So these are all like the state-funded organisations, but I'm really aware that in this area there's a huge density of VFX houses, animation organisations that are here for a reason. You know, they're in this particular area for a reason. And I'd love to see the map that allows us to see, well, who are our neighbours a bit more clearly, because actually it's hard to know who's inside those buildings without a big sign on them. So I think there's like another layer that's connected to that, which is part of the ecosystem, and it also speaks to the workforce challenge and the skills challenge and the porousness between the public and private sector. So going back to the point about the potential, does anyone have a pitch or some ideas for what the potential is, or even some thoughts about what they quite like to see? Could be practical ideas, could be... What do you think? Seb?
I think the potential has changed. I think when the precinct was being devised and Max was doing this pre-pandemic, the pandemic has changed lots of things. It's changed our sense of sociality, but at the same time, that sort of sense of what the city is and can be, and whether that is the central hub for activity during the week or whether it's now distributed. It's changed how people work in this part of in our cities and what they work with too. So whether the workforce and the educational, whether students need to be on campus as well, whether those VFX studios behind closed doors are actually working with a labour force that's distributed around the world. So I think there is it's a different environment now, and so I would ask how do we make sure that the precinct evolves in a way that serves the new needs that we may have and the needs that we might need in 2040. The garden, I'm sure, will be beautiful when it launches, but it needs to still be beautiful in 2040, and it needs to serve the different needs of our communities in 2040, which are not the ones we have now. And I think that there are issues when we talk about spending your whole creative career in the precinct, is that presupposes very different labour relations and class situations too. We don't talk about class enough, and we don't talk about labour, and those things have radically changed. And I think that's one of the challenges for the institutions that have existed for a long time in the precinct, and the non-funded institutions and organisations that are emerging. And I think it's the LUME is also south of the river, and is actively possibly the western edge of what would be a creative precinct as well. So there's a lot of change going on, and I'm kind of torn between this sort of notion of a precinct as a geographical space or as a psychological mental space that we learn, psychogeography of arts and culture, let's say, and sort of that psychogeography. If we think about who's in the room now, we should be thinking about who isn't in the room and doesn't see themselves as part of what they might describe as an arts precinct versus a cultural precinct, or just the city, or even what is the city now. So that, to me, is one of the tensions in the room, that we're tensions in all of this, and I think urban planners are facing huge issues around this too. I'm sure if the Urbis person was still here, they'd have lots of interesting things to say about that change. West Kowloon in Hong Kong was designed and done before the political changes that make that very fragile now. That we're in a very turbulent period of social and political change, and I think these precincts have to find ways to evolve, as the institutions do too. And I think, places like Bruce's are ones that because they don't receive government support in a direct way, they are often the ones who can perhaps point at ways that we might respond differently.
Thanks, Seb. TJ, from your experience being in LA, New Zealand, here, and with your understanding of the landscape of funding and innovation in Korea as well, can you bring some perspective on to this question of what the potential is of co-location or precincts from your own experience?
My point of view, this is actually amazing. This is great. And this is what I've dreamed, actually. So the thing that I tried to build at New Zealand is to build some like a collaborative hub to promote global collaboration. So I asked my university that my center should be in the good location with good food and beverage. So it was near the harbor, and then the center of Wellington City has lots of bar and cafe. I think that kind of an environment is quite important for, especially for digital immersive economy, because it requires lots of combination and then convergence of technology. That just not just simple technology, the hardware, software, and whole interface need to be converged together. And also developing content is also like a big pipeline that we need to work together. And also we need to accommodate lots of creative people and artists to discuss the idea from the beginning to develop some new scientific solution. So this kind of thing need to be happen in the centralized location, and then this precinct is actually amazing infrastructure that this is very attractive. In my point of view, from the other side of the world, I think if we can have some like, I don't know, so I'm probably miss this information. If there's some like a physical hub to showcase it, more easy to connect and communicate, it would be ideal to promote the collaboration, connection, not just people within Melbourne, but also people from other side can come here to work together for developing this kind of environment.
Yes, actually, that made me, one of my questions from the last session was, I don't know if Sarah's still here, what is the future of MapCo, and does it exist after these projects are finished, and will it serve a function like TJ's just mentioned? Maybe we can pick that up in questions if Sarah is still, or anyone from MapCo is here still. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Bruce, I'm just thinking about what people have said about what Seb was saying, what TJ is saying. What would you like to see out of this idea of the precinct? Would you like to be seen as the Western edge? What do you want from this kind of things? What would actually be useful for you?
You're opening up a can of worms
Yeah,
there, which I don't think you should go there.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Look, we've had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, okay. There we go. I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to find, the clock part of this is like the tiniest part of the whole screen. It's like, that's what I need the biggest. Oh, the clock, there's a clock there. Solange, over to you. Can you, our first responder?
Wow, that's a hard one to follow.
That was a mic drop.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting. I might pick up on that. And the word that came to mind as soon as you said what you said was communication. And I wonder, without anyone moving, I wonder if I was to ask you the question right at this moment, would you know who is sitting left to you, right to you, behind you, in front of you? Have you had a conversation? Have you? Oh, I can see some people cheating. And maybe one of the first things is we can't answer the questions that we haven't had the conversations about. So perhaps what needs to happen is to have events like this hosted by Rhee, our wonderful dean, and our faculty, and for people to actually just turn around and only connect.
Thank you, Solange. So many juicy things to talk about. Where are we going to go next? Well, I know everyone's got a question bubbling away in their minds, or their legs, or their hearts. Please be thinking about those because we'll come to them after this next section. So I'm just preparing you for the interactive part.
Robert.
Yes.
Robert, can I ask one? Bruce, do you want to tell everybody about the cool things you've been doing with emerging digital artists in Swinburne? Because it might be an interesting. It doesn't because you have been doing collaborations, just not here in the precinct.
No, look, we have. We have an emerging digital artist program at the LUME, where we look. At the end of the day, if you're a digital artist, or let's say if you're an artist today, you're more than likely working in the digital medium. If Leonardo da Vinci was alive today, or Salvador Dali was alive today, they'd be working in the digital medium. But there's very few places for people to show their artistic work outside of gaming and outside of TV commercials and the like. And the LUME's been a great place to do that, and ACMI as well. So we have purposely got some great digital artists to come in with the ability to work with our team, and now we've extended that out into students at Swinburne, but we take students from anywhere to come in and learn how to actually create in this medium, because it's a very, very unique and difficult medium. The LUME's 150 projectors in the air. It's a 99-channel audio system. It's the biggest toy that a digital artist could play with, and we're quite open and happy to do that. And there are these programs where we allow them to create a couple of minute featurette, and if it's good enough, then it goes on display with our main feature experience. And that's our way of just helping to foster that next generation of digital artists to come along. And we've also put them overseas in some of our touring experiences as little add-ons to the main experience.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to future trends and preparedness now. I mean, it comes straight out of everything we've talked about. What does the future hold for this sector? How do we deal with the shock of continuous innovation? What challenges does AI pose? Oh, this is the AI part. What do we need to do to prepare the workforce to make the most of emerging opportunities? So one of the ways I described this described the situation to the panel when we were communicating was, because this bit has got a future focus, it's quite good. You can be completely critical about the present, because we're actually thinking about future trends and how we might prepare for them in this section, which hopefully will be positive. But that means you can be critical about the present if necessary. Monica, how do you see this from your perspective?
Well, as someone who is working in this area, it's incredibly challenging to find the support that I need. Even being placed in a wonderful institution like this, where we have access to so much expertise, but there is no one place. I would love to see a hub where we have expertise from all of our faculties in one place, and with access for students and for researchers to just come in and if you're stuck with something, or you want to find guidance on how to do something, there's a quick question that can be asked. There's no such thing at the moment, I think. That would be really good, really helpful to have something, and something that's, I think, quite achievable here in this precinct. Yeah, that's my bit.
TJ? Future trends.
It's a kind of current trend and maybe impact for the future trend that's happening in the media technology sector. So I mentioned that when I start my job at Samsung, they tried to build some platform to transform analog design to a digital one, and they wanted to build a unified platform. And it might be possible at that time, but it was very, very challenging. And then nowadays, the media ecosystem is more complicated, so one platform cannot provide the whole solution. So each people has their own platform and software, and that need to be more specialized and more narrowed down for the create that for that specialty. And that's the thing that industry adopt that. The thing that is happening at the moment is that they are trying to unify the data format. So the Universal Scene Description, USD, is a data format that Pixar has initiated a long time ago, but now it's adopted by NVIDIA and Apple and many big tech giants, and try to make some standard data format that can share the data through the platform. And that is a kind of massive trend at the moment for the media technology sector. And I think this is quite helpful for multiple collaboration with people. So we can have similar data format and platform, data format that can use for any platform. And so if we follow that data standard. So I think this is an important part for the collaborative environment, and the technology is moving forward at that direction. And this is the kind of thing that we can monitor, and then ideally, if we can provide some idea for what will be the form that they can consider as a standard from Australian point of view, if we can, as Monica said, if we have a hub and we have lots of trial and error and we have clear needs, we can share our needs to the people who are making the platform and the standard. So I think that is the kind of thing that we can connect with a global leader and prepare the future together.
Mm. Yes, Max?
I think for me, the most interesting and kind of satisfying of the digital immersive experiences are the ones that are the most interactive. So that's kind of the immersive bit for me, is I can interact, and it's more engaging. It's I'm influencing. Probably if I'm learning, I'm retaining things much better because I'm going a sort of two-way street there, and I think the AI angle here is very important, because to get the real interactivity, there's a degree of AI that's going to be involved in that. And as that technology sort of ramps up in its complexity and sophistication, the barriers to entry may come down because it's more commonplace, but our reliance on these giant mega Silicon Valley corporations and their control of that ecosystem will probably also increase. So I'm just a little bit worried about on this trajectory of everything getting more and more sophisticated and complicated and also more accessible. Are we getting into these gated communities controlled by deranged plutocrats? Yeah.
Oh yes, that one. Well, I think both of you in a way are speaking about the co-evolution of new media and art forms with creative tech and new forms of technology. You know, these things are connected, and we haven't spoken so much about the creative tech or the tech area in the same way. But I did notice that when I was looking at some government figures, that when the government looks at the creative sector, they see software design as part of the
sometimes, yeah, depending on who's counting. Yes,
which is interesting, because then maybe that really skews the way that everything gets measured. But it also talks about about creativity and the nature of creativity embedded in technological development. Bruce, the $1 million question: what is the future? Please, can you get the crystal ball out and tell us? I mean, you're right at the forefront of innovating in this area. What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, look, it might be no surprise, but we're down to 6-month business plans at the moment, because the last 2 years has just seen incredible change, and incredible change in trends. And trend is your friend. I often say to people, if you're doing a SWOT analysis, add in that extra T at the end for trend, because it's really what you need to hone in on. We live and die by the visitor. I think that's the major difference, arguably, with myself and many others sitting in here, because we're not government funded. If we don't get the visitors in, and we don't get the paying visitors in, we die. We don't have the ability to say, can we have an extra 10, 20, 40, 50 mil next year because we didn't quite make budget this year? We have the visitor only in mind, and that visitor is changing, and their demands are changing really quickly. And it's not just the young, it's across the board. So we're seeing a huge gravitation to the big acts. Okay, the Taylor Swifts, of course, and they take an enormous amount of money out of the economy, and you've all heard this before, but that's what the people want to see. We're seeing music venues closing down all around the world because people are saving up now 4 weeks, 6 weeks of pay to go to that one big concert and pay for it. They'll go to one big exhibition, they'll go to one big festival, they'll go to one big, sporting grand final or alike. They're not doing the multitude of things, and it's not just here, this is globally, that they were before. So the challenge in this economy and where we are now, it's actually all about content. The tech is really just a platform for the content and the story that you're telling. If you don't have a compelling story and you don't have a compelling content, you don't have anything, unless it's funded and you're not relying on visitors coming and you're not relying on the income that comes from those visitors coming. But if you are relying on doing something that is actually sustainable and not relying on government funding, then you have to have the visitor in mind, and the visitor is changing and has changed really quickly.
Seb, you must be so relieved that you don't need to worry about visitation anymore.
Oh, it's excellent. It's very excellent. No, of course I do.
Are you closing him down if he doesn't like the numbers?
Well, no, of course they won't. TJ made a really good point that standardisation is absolutely key. And so if you think about how we get water and electricity, we don't have different standards for those. There's standards which allow infrastructure to be built, and that's what the state-owned institutions should be providing, is infrastructure that allows new types of creativity to flourish, and for those new types of creativity to reach audiences and to build audiences for those who operate in the for-profit space, or for artist collectives and others who operate well beyond that in the experimental space. And that infrastructural piece feels like we need a different type of infrastructure now to support the new types of creativity that Monica and others, and many of us in the room, have either been part of or want to be part of as well, and where, as students of the future, will be exploring. And the people who are making works that Bruce shows or we show, that infrastructure piece is key. And I think going back to the UK model that was mentioned, and Monica's point about the ecology needs an infrastructure, and when we think about infrastructure purely as we have thought about it in the 20th century, we're missing this new type of infrastructure that is different. It's harder for us to articulate. Max and I to articulate to the Treasury that the infrastructure is different. It is what are the new types of roads for the content that Bruce and I show. It's not what we have now, and the reason that we don't have a hub here is because we haven't been able to articulate what that infrastructure is. And the UK has had some advantages in this space. They've worked with a creative economy for decades, and that soft power push has been a very, very big part of their post-colonial, post-empire identity through music and film and TV and culture. It's been sustained, it's been focused. They have a significant population and therefore market size. They have access to population and capital in Europe, and that ecology has been key. And that migration of those centres, those hubs beyond London is really important, but that has also been very challenging for them to do. London still is what the soft power still accretes to. And that's something that I think, we haven't at the federal level or at the state level as much as perhaps we should have focused on. And the federal level has perhaps, starting with the new cultural policy, beginning to seed those sorts of things. But it's a cultural policy that doesn't talk enough about infrastructure. What is the infrastructure we need? Because that infrastructure is going to be bloody expensive. And it's not just new types of galleries or projectors, it's investment, as TJ said, in computational sovereignty and all of these other things. That is going to be really hard, and it's going to make for some very difficult policy choices in Australia. But I would argue that the funded institutions that don't need to rely on purely a ticket price. If I had to rely on ticket price, you'd be paying a lot more to come to our exhibitions and to our films, which you couldn't afford. And you've seen exhibition prices go up around the city, except I would add, in the exhibitions we put on, we actually put our prices down a little bit to deal with people not being able to afford them. I would suggest that one of the challenges and the opportunities for the state-owned institutions and the national institutions is actually to be the bridge for new publics to begin to engage, and it's actually creating interest for new audiences that then become creators and new audiences that feed that ecology. I always talk about, you know, when our programs are successful, we have brought more experimental work to a broader population of people. Now, if I'm running a commercial business, I used to do lots of music things, and I was purely driven by making money from ticket sales. I would have limits to that experimentalness or the breadth of audience. And I think being a state organisation, we have a duty to broaden the audience as much as possible, not stick to those who can afford it and would self-describe as an arts audience. I'm kind of not interested in them. They're going to come anyway. But I want to bring the most experimental stuff to everybody else and make it legible and accessible and memorable for them, which then allows Bruce and others to also do more experimental things because the market is there to support it. But when state institutions do less experimental things or for narrower audiences, I think there's a huge problem.
Well, please join me in thanking our amazing panel today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert and panel, and thank you so much for your questions, even though, of course, to answer them all, we'd be here the rest of the day, but they're really important to have raised. Just a little recap of a term I can't believe I haven't learned to use in a university, high capital. I'm stealing that one next time I write for a grant application. The idea of the high capital, the idea that the economy is a collaboration. The idea that immersive is an open term, and that's also what we're experiencing now. Thinking about how the digital is so prevalent, but at the same time, we're certainly getting students who only want to work in analog, like the analog photographers. Thank God we kept all of our analog stuff. We are one of the few creative schools in the country that did that. Everybody got rid of their analog printing stuff and photography. We kept ours. That turned out to be a very smart move. Creative science, TJ, hear you. We often don't think so much about our scientific colleagues as being creative. And the idea, as you noted, of being immersive is a very open term. The precinct is a psychogeographic space, something Leah has reminded us a couple of times in your questions, and I'm sure that this will be part of our next panel, which is the First Nations panel. And the universal basic income for creatives. Absolutely, and something we should really think about how we get behind if we want this precinct and the broader idea, that psychogeographic idea of a precinct to work for us.